Welcome to the Consultants Way podcast, your go-to resource for all things professional services consulting. Brought to you by McMann and Anthony, a strategy consulting firm with over 30 years of experience helping B2B organizations achieve sustainable growth, and the Consultants Way, the leading comprehensive consultant development program. Hosted by Dean McMann and Anthony Paluska, we share expert insights, firsthand experiences, and conversations with industry leaders on the topics that interest you most.
The views and opinions expressed by guests on this podcast are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of their employer, company, or affiliated organizations.
Welcome back to the Consultants Way podcast. Anthony Paluska, Dean McMann, and today we are joined by Jim DeCristofaro. Jim, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So Jim, you're the VP of Professional Services at Aptitude Software. We've got a couple of topics we want to dive into today, but before we do that, I want to give you a chance to introduce yourself and provide a little bit of your background to the audience.
Yeah, thank you. So I've been with in professional services for 15 years. I started at a Big Four accounting firm in the audit practice, then switched over to an accounting and financial services advisory firm. And then now at Aptitude Software. Aptitude's an enterprise SaaS financial software company. I now oversee all delivery in North America and EMEA, as well as our post-go live managed service globally.
Great. Well, thanks for joining us, and looking forward to diving into the topic today. So as we were prepping for this and having some conversations in advance, I think the theme of the discussion is, for lots of reasons in professional services and consulting, a lot of change is occurring in across a whole bunch of different fronts. And so what I'd like to do with our conversation today is maybe just unpack a couple of topics and talk about what's changing, why it's changing, and then what PS teams and leaders might want to do about some of the change that's occurring in the market. And I'll try not to say change the entire time. But so we'll bounce all around. So let's start with onboarding. I want to talk about onboarding challenges. We hear a bunch of different sides of this. Would like your perspective of it. In some ways, onboarding is more difficult than it's ever been before because of the complexity of the work we do and remote work, and we don't have the kind of apprenticeship and shadowing programs that we might have had existing in the past. In other ways, AI is accelerating and simplifying the onboarding process for lots of people. How do you see that change occurring and impacting PS organizations the most right now? And just kind of what challenges do you see with that?
Yeah, so I think you nailed it. There's pros and cons. So I'd say maybe since post-COVID, there's been a big struggle when it comes to onboarding new consultants, especially more junior consultants. A lot of these consultants, the consultants that we see, they don't have that business acumen that kind of comes with being on site at a client for, 3 or 4 days a week, month after month. And you kind of lose that. And I like to say that people learn through osmosis. So, just being, even though you might not be leading a meeting or part of a meeting, being just surrounded by people that are doing the work and you overhear conversations. And I think, for especially the first couple of years of a consultant's, business career, that goes a long way with just how to speak to clients, how to speak to peers. So, when it comes to the business acumen side, that's a big struggle. Additionally, when it comes to, learning new products or learning processes, again, looking over people's shoulders, you tend to pick things up a lot quicker. You can have those, off the cuff conversations where it's just like, hey, can you please explain to me this? Or, hey, I heard you talk about, this other thing. Can you please elaborate on that? Where, now if you're remote, you have to dial the person up and say, hey, can you jump on the call? So it is definitely on the challenging side. On the flip to that, though, there are a lot of new tools, like you mentioned AI, but just, I think in the past several years, there are a lot more tools at people's disposal so that there are different mechanisms for training and, getting people onboarded to the state where they can be an effective contributor. My personal experience is that the cons are outweighing the pros, and that the onboarding process in general, where it might have taken, let's say, 3 to 6 months, is now taking 6 months to a year to get like a junior new resource onboarded at the level that they, historically did maybe, 6 or 7 years ago.
Yeah, I tend to see it the same way. I think of my own personal experience 15 or so years ago when I got into consulting, and the first client that I worked with 4 days a week, I'd show up. We were in a conference room, the coldest room in the entire client's office. I mean, it was so cold. We had a projector in there that we would work off of, and we'd have to turn it on even if we were using it to get the little warmth off of the projector, try to warm the room up. But I can't remember anything that I worked on that I was personally assigned to during that year, but it was probably one of the most fundamental learning experiences for me, because clients would come in there all the time, and whatever anybody else was working on, you get to absorb, and you can't possibly replicate that virtually, even if you tried to, because you can't just be in every conversation. It's not as appropriate for a client to call a senior person ad hoc and have a conversation with them and then say, hold on 1 second, let me dial in my new consultant to listen to how I deal with this. So I think the cons are outweighing some of the new pros and technology advances there. What are you and your team doing to try and adjust and at least help as much as you can new consultants get onboarded more quickly?
Yeah, definitely. So first and foremost, you need to have a more robust onboarding plan. So I think back in the day, it was kind of like, hey, let's throw them in. They'll just, shadow us, and we'll, over time they'll sink or swim. And I think, that just is not effective anymore. So what we do is we have, multiple playback sessions. We'll have a mentor. We like to use like a train the trainer approach, where the best way to learn is to teach. So, get the people involved, but then say, hey, you're going to go and give this presentation to this person. We'll be there to support you, but the expectation is you're going to have to go in and do this. So it kind of, puts more accountability on them to really learn the material and get up to speed and really pay attention, where, when you're in a room, you have to pay attention. When you're remote, I get that people can be a little, distracted or not be paying 100%. So between mentorship, having a strong onboarding plan, and then kind of that training methodology, that's come a long way for sure.
Yeah. One thing you mentioned that we find really funny is we'll see a young consultant on a call like this, not paying attention and looking bored and looking away, and just one-on-one stuff like, hey, act like you came to the meeting, just, but also, in our training business, we get a lot of requests to specify their particular onboarding. Just to pick on one, GE really wanted everything to be about how to get them through that time. And you were talking about 6 months to a year. I sit on a panel with a lot of the big firm. Matter of fact, the firm you used to be with, and they're looking at a 2-year time frame for what they would call begin the value return now, which is so much larger than it was back when I started in World War II.
Yep. I think the key there, to your point, is intentionality of it has gone way up, right? Whether it's 6 months or 18 months, being very intentional instead of just saying I'm going to assign our new consultants to a project and they're going to learn through some of the osmosis, or and there being a somewhat maybe unstructured or at least lighter structure to the onboarding process. It was overcome by their proximity to resources that could teach them and their access to conversations and information. We need to be a lot more intentional with the mentorship, with the trainer, with those sorts of things. All right, I'm going to change gears a little bit to something else that I know is changing a little bit here, and you alluded to it, which is this growing need for business acumen across consulting teams and the lack of it that we're seeing a lot of people enter the space with, right? They have their technical expertise, their functional domain expertise, but just general business acumen seems to be lacking at a time where it's more needed than ever. You see that the same way?
100%. So there is an expectation. Well, historically, I think it might have been, okay, you can just go out and deliver. And if you're delivering and you're executing for the client, then, you're doing a great job. I don't think that's necessarily the case anymore. I think nowadays you need to be building those relationships, or maybe historically the relationships were maybe at a higher level, and maybe more junior resources can kind of get away with saying, I'm just doing the work. I don't need to be building those relationships. That's kind of the senior level role. But now I think at every single level, you need to be building those relationships. So, to your peers. So junior levels, building that relationship with, that kind of same level at the organization, PMs at that same level of organization, senior leadership at that level, making sure that you're, kind of having your ears to the ground. You're making sure, okay, well, you need to be building these trusted advisors, because at the end of the day, when you're not in a room, like, you want your client to be championing you. And then them being able to say, hey, look at the value that, that these guys have brought. There is something to be said about, going out and having building that acumen, so that it's more than just, hey, I'm doing the right job, right? At the end of the day, you really want these people to see you as a trusted advisor.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's another big trend that's shifting as well, which is this increased need on our consulting teams to build more of these executive relationships. But underpinning that, I think, to your point, is you have to be able to speak their language and not just be the expert on your product or your topic, but instead understand the implications to how this is going to work in their organization, the other challenges that they're faced with, in order for you to build that relationship effectively. And you can't do that if you don't understand and aren't interested in the details of how their business actually operates.
Yeah, we have to develop the ability to think, and I don't mean that to be pejorative, but if you're going to have a relationship with someone and they're providing information, you got to provide content and thought, and the whole words trusted advisor come from being advising. So but what I loved about what you said, Jim, is it begins day one. Practice it, work on it, get better at it. Think about different things to add value in the conversations. And then our leaders need to be asking them about it, right? Need to be following up and said, who are you building a relationship? How's that going? Do you need any help with that, right? In addition to training and other things, but we need the real-time feedback loop.
Yeah, definitely. And building those relationships has, multiple benefits, both being able to identify. So oftentimes a client will come and say, hey, I've heard of this in my organization. We're exploring this finance transformation or whatever it might be. And it helps if you hear that, and the alarm sounds, and you go, oh, I think this is something that, we could potentially provide some additional value. Or on the contrary side, if they say something like, hey, we're, exploring these other opportunities, you go, oh, okay, well, now I know that maybe things aren't as rosy as we initially had thought they were. And so you kind of need to react on that. So I think, having that business acumen, building those relationships, it really does, prevent, surprises. And so, it's definitely one of the things that we like to focus on to make sure that our consultants have that.
Yeah, how are you guys embedding that into training, to expectations management, right? So both fronts. One is, how are you making sure that the team has the appropriate skills and knowledge of an organization, and how does maybe that fit into onboarding or just ongoing training, or some expectation that they should understand their client's business. And then the second piece to that, which is related, which is, okay, what if anything has changed around the expectations you set for your team from a day one or an entry level, that says part of your job, and a significant part of that, is to build these trusted advisor type relationships.
Yeah. So I think, it's a multi-pronged approach. So part one is, I think oftentimes people are like, oh, I need trainings, and people will go, oh, well, technical trainings. But yeah, there's also the soft skills that are associated as well. So we definitely have consultants go through soft skills training. In addition to like actual trainings, we also will do recaps on calls. So if I'm listening to a call and I hear someone talking or something, I might say after the fact, like, hey, you notice that they said something like this, that might mean this. This is how the things you should look out for. Or in, maybe a worst case scenario, if something does go wrong, we do a recap, like a post-mortem, to say, okay, well, this didn't go over so well. What could we have done differently? Did we have those relationships? And then looking at, clients or things that do go very well and say, hey, why was this a success? Oh, well, look, it's because of that relationship. And then so, it's not uncommon that when we're going over the state of affairs of an account or account review, say, hey, what relationships do you have? Which ones have you built? Are they strong? Are they weak? What can you do to improve them? Getting out in front of clients, I think traveling on site, if a client sees you as more than just a face on a screen, and they get to know you, they know what your interests are, what their interests are. I think that goes a very long way. So it's it's training and just having some playback sessions.
Yeah, on the travel piece, it's interesting because I think we've had a couple of different shifts that have occurred. For the longest time, I think clients expected you to be on site because they were paying fees for this that are meaningful, and they want their team there present to make sure that they're physically located. And it was more difficult to do work from a distance perspective anyway. And then I think with COVID, we all got a little bit more comfortable delivering distance, and the clients got more comfortable with us being remote. And now it seems like we're shifting back where it feels like more of the value is on us or for us to be at the client site, because we can do all those things. We can have the, outside of the office conversations, the water cooler conversations, can read body language differently. We can build some of those better relationships. And we're having to resell our clients on something that they wanted all along, which was us being there. Have you seen the same pushback from clients? And in those instances, how have you positioned the value of you or your team being there so that we can do what is probably best for them, but it's also really great for us long term about building some of those relationships and stickiness?
Yeah, I think it's a little meeting halfway. So some clients will say, listen, we can do everything remote. And we say, okay, I get that we're not going to be doing 100% on site, but let's determine the parts of a project where it would make sense to be on site. So maybe the beginning of the project, maybe in the testing phase, right? Coming up with some mutual understanding of like, hey, this is the best bang for your buck of when it makes sense to be on site. And then on top of that, I think back in the day, the expectation was, hey, there's no travel unless it's, paid for by the client. I think that's kind of shifted where it's, hey, we actually internally find value on being there. So, if it's the right investment for our organization, then let's go out there and go meet clients and, on our own dime. And at the end of the day, that can open up opportunities or build relationships that far exceed the costs of travel.
Yep. No, I like that point. That's a big mindset shift that I think a lot of organizations have to make, which is, okay, this is truly valuable. And if we underinvest in going to see clients, and if they're not paying for it and we're not investing both the time or even the financial resources in doing so, we can get to a spot a couple of years down the road where we've just lost touch of the market and we've lost some of those relationships and so much of work, especially, right? I mean, for some organizations, they're all over the continuum, but a lot of professional services firms get a lot of their business from kind of repeat and expansion clients, from those that trust the PS team. So it's hard to build that trust as effectively virtually. Another big change that's happening in the market, I know you're experiencing, is seeing this shift from, and I'll ask you to theorize on why this is happening as well, but the shift from who controls the budget within the organization and who controls essentially the decision rights for often technology purchases. For a long time, IT was given free rein to spend whatever they needed to spend to solve a problem, because nobody in the organization understood what they were spending that money on, and they had what seemed like unlimited budget. And the whole, especially the enterprise software ecosystem, took advantage of that, right? They catered to that market and they were able to charge high fees and do all sorts of stuff. That's shifting a little bit, and there's a lot more scrutiny, it seems, on the ROI of the investments and certainly kind of how this all fits into the business strategy side of things, as decision rights have shifted from IT to finance. So I know you've seen that shift. I'll ask maybe an opinion question on why you think that shift is occurring, and then maybe we dive into what it means for how we operate as a PS team.
Yeah, so Definitely, there's always been kind of that butting of heads between IT and finance in terms of who owns the budget and the influencer in that relationship. But I'm seeing the shift in toward from IT to finance, and the reason why, I'd love to know the exact reason. Maybe it's a bit of as a lot of organizations are moving to the cloud. Definitely, finance want more control over the tools that impact their business outcomes. I think historically, when things were just on premise and there was these huge monster solutions in their organization, it made sense for IT to own it. But now I think with the emerging technologies that have come out with AI and just a bunch of technologies, I can see that shift moving over to finance.
I think part of it is because of the runaway investment over a long period of time, the non-IT executives, CFO, CEO, COO, they don't trust IT with budget. So the argument is you've spent. We had a client once that we were working on a project doubling their value, and they looked at that like it was a big expense. It wasn't that big expense, big company, but they were going to spend $65 million on rationalizing their ERP. And they didn't even think of it as a budget problem. And today you just wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the biggest, well, maybe the biggest piece of talking more about the emerging technologies, right? There's been a huge rise of self-service. So I think back in the day, finance had to rely on IT, right? You'd want to do something, you'd say, all right, let me ask IT to go do it. And now, with new technologies, that the power is with the finance users to either go into the system and make those changes themselves. So there is that less reliance on IT, which again would kind of shift that power struggle.
Yeah, I remember when Salesforce did that and switched the power to, hey, we're not even going to be on premise, not going to do anything. Don't worry about it. It's just a sales cost, and completely broke the model. Yeah. And now it just
Yeah, I remember being surprised when, and I think it's all caused by the same sort of dynamics here, when I started seeing IT executives reporting into CFOs. And I was like, well, that doesn't make it doesn't make any sense. And the CFO had no idea what was happening in IT, but it was a way to rein in some of the IT spend by putting it under the CFO's responsibility, probably because they complained so much about it, with it feeling like this black box that existed in this other function that had a budget that the CFO had to do something with. I think we probably end up with that going back to some sort of normalcy where we don't have that reporting structure anymore as the decision rights have shifted a little bit, and it doesn't have to be reporting relationships that shifted. But all of that being said, what are you all doing, or what are you suggesting consulting teams do to account for this new decision maker? It's not like that's a wrong way to say it. It's not like the CFO is a new decision maker. They were always a real critical influencer, but they seem to be the primary decision maker that we are now selling to more and more often than selling the technical benefits to the IT team. So how are you seeing both sales and delivery of technology and PS changing with that?
Yeah, I mean, so it kind of goes back to the relationships topic, right? You need to build relationships on both sides of the aisle. You need to show both sides the pros and cons of what you're delivering. Like, if you're talking to the IT team, it's, hey, this is how it helps you. It frees up your resources to go focus on more strategic things if you're allowing the finance team to be more self-service. So you have to show the IT team, hey, we're not taking away from you, we're freeing you up to do more strategic options. And then on the finance side, that's an easy sale, right? You're just saying, hey, we're giving you a lot more power and things to play around with. So yeah, there is a way that it's a win-win, and it's not a it's not one loser and one winner.
Yeah. All right. So we've talked to maybe 4 or 5 different topics of things that are changing. Anything else that you're seeing as a big shift going on right now in the market that you all are paying attention to and focusing on?
One of the big things that we're focusing on are, I think a lot of clients are having tighter budgets. And so there's a lot more scrutiny around, just rates and what the ROI of a project. And so I think historically you look at these projects that are they'd say, oh, well, it's not unlimited budget, but historically it felt like it was unlimited budget. And they'd say, oh yeah, well, we'll just see the outcome, 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road. That's just not the case anymore. Now clients are looking, what's my return on investment? And they're looking for return on investment that are, within a year for sure. We're talking like maybe 6 to 9 months ROI. And so there is, that is a monumental shift compared to what things were doing, a couple of years ago.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, in our consulting business, historically, our clients would be 12 to 18 months, where we would do some sort of transformational program for them. And there has been this huge shift of the projects that they want to buy I need 2 months that have a very discrete outcome associated with it. And they might still do 12 to 18 months worth of engagements, but each of those, I think, sometimes sub-optimize to the ultimate client outcome because you're not able to think with the longer term vision with them, but they want to buy the piecemeal steps of the process that each have specific value associated with them, rather than thinking a little bit longer term about how you value things and how to structure. You would structure a program different if you're trying to de-risk the purchase decisions instead of de-risk the transformational effort. So, yeah.
And that's a pendulum. I mean, that's a pendulum that moves about every 7 years. And it's good. It's good for us. It's good for them. But Anthony's right. They often sub-optimize. Like I can't work on what's going to really affect a year and a half from now because I got to work on
this quarter.
Yeah. It's like an academic year where the test score is more important than learning the material. Yeah. So Jim, this has been great. And we really appreciate you coming. Leave us with like the most important thing ever said in the Western Hemisphere or just something cool.
All right. So I think what's really important is to don't try to tackle everything reactively. I think you need to lead with intention. And so what I mean by that is you need to be very proactive. You don't just wait for fires to happen. You need to, think ahead and think, well, what could go wrong? Where are all the different outcomes? And so you're really preventing these issues before they turn into issues. And that's the way that I'd like to have, my consulting team think. I think that starts from day one of the hiring process and, getting them onboarded and helping them shape the way that they think to get to that point where you do have that proactive client relationship. So it's around, building those relationships and not just task execution.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point. And yes, with so much changing, we can't afford to sit around and wait to see where it all shakes out. We have to take some stands on things that are obviously going to be beneficial no matter where the changing landscape kind of ends up landing. And so investing in developing the team, investing in client relationships, all of those things, no matter what happens with the next iteration of consulting PS or any industry, those remain critical. So I like it. All right, Jim. Well, thank you for the time. It was great chatting with you on this topic. I'm sure we can do this again in 6 months, and there'll be 4 new topics that we can kick around that are evolving in the market, and we can see how you and the team are addressing those and see if we can give some guidance to everybody else. So looking forward to that.
Yeah, thank you guys.